This week's local marketing update is brought to you by Scott Gallagher. Scott is the co-founder of Local Marketing Source and has become the recognized expert in providing online marketing services to local businesses. Follow Scott on Twitter at ScottGallagher5 and on Facebook.com/ScottPGallagher.
Hey, well, good afternoon, everyone. Scott Gallagher here with Local Marketing Source, and we're bringing you our local marketing weekly industry update. Now, next week's LMS member call is going to be, it will be August 2nd at 4 p.m. Eastern. This week, we've got a relatively short update. There's not a lot that has happened in the last week, typically because it is the middle of summer. Not a lot tends to change. Executives are out, and updates don't tend to happen as often. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Google Knowledge Graph and why this is a problem for local businesses. But in addition to that, Matt Cutts has come out, and I want to bring up the concept and the conversation of duplicate content. Very controversial discussion. But what does Google have to say about duplicate content? Now, as far as the weekly tips, well, last week we talked about the 7 content ideas for a local business in order of priority. And then this week, I want to change tone a little bit and have a discussion of QR codes and the uses of those QR codes for a local business. Well, for an agency last week, we talked about the 3 top content pieces for a local business and had a walkthrough of that. And this week, in light of the local business tip for the agency, we're going to talk about a QR marketing strategy for local businesses and how as you, either as an agency owner or a marketer, can further help your customers or your clients with QR codes. So let's talk about this local business QR code, and I want to talk about what a QR code is first. QR codes have been around for a few years now, and they're essentially a 2-dimensional barcode. A barcode, we know, have the vertical lines on it. That's just a one dimension. You've got top and bottom. And a 2-dimensional is it's a box, and you'll see them on in a lot of restaurants. A lot of different stores have adopted them, and it allows for you to take your camera and your smartphone, you scan the QR code, and then your smartphone then goes to either a website address or automatically makes a phone call or gives the user a whole bunch of information. And so QR codes are a link between the offline world and the online world. What I mean by that is the physical print of the QR code. It's a physical entity in the offline world. We scan it with our phone, and it brings us to digital content. Typically, that content is accessed online from the internet and pulled down to the smartphone or the device itself. And so there's a lot of different ideas as how to, what QR codes can be used for. Scan, in Best Buy, scan this, and you'll get a bunch of information about a particular product. Restaurants, scan this and, visit our Facebook page. But in the local business world, there's a lot of there's a struggle to be able to find ways to get users to actually do that. Now, first off, the question becomes, how many people are listening to this and know how to go onto their smartphone and how to actually scan a QR code? That you've got to get a second app, well, you've got to get an app, a barcode scanner app in most cases, or go to the app itself and scan it, and then it will automatically open up a browser. But there's a little bit of a hurdle with that. If you've got an Android device, it's not as easy as, say, an Apple. But once you get that application and understand that, and that hurdles. But there's just a small percentage of users that are actually savvy enough to do that and have that application on their phone. what is it, 40 or 50% of cell phone users have smartphones, but maybe 15 or 20% of smartphone users have a barcode scanning app on it. So you're really only looking at about 10% of the total population could potentially access a barcode or a QR code. But that number is changing. Now, one thing that we've found in the local business world, because of the 3 pillars of local search, and reviews being one of them, that QR codes are used or can be used to garnish or acquire reviews. Now, solicitation of reviews is a violation of the terms and conditions on Yelp and on Google and many other sites. So we're not going to go and solicit, but we've got to understand what solicitation of reviews actually means before we proceed a little bit further to this review strategy with QR codes. Reviews, the terms and conditions state that you can't go out and ask for a review. So if you go and buy ice, if you're selling ice cream and then asking somebody, hey, can you go and leave me a review about your experience with that ice cream cone, that's soliciting a review. You will eventually get caught by the search engines. I can get into the whole details of why and how you get caught in regards to that, but we're not gonna discuss that right now. Let's just assume that you can get caught. So asking for a review is wrong, but if you put a QR code on something, how can you really ask for it without violating the terms and the conditions? Well, when somebody says something good, forget about the internet, and somebody says something good about a business out of their own organic free will, chances are they're pretty happy about their product or their service that they had paid for. Well, that's an unsolicited testimonial or review of your product or service. Well, what's wrong with taking that existing, organic, unsolicited review and digitizing it so our online community can experience that authentic, unique review? Well, that's the fine line, is that local businesses can train their employees to have what I call a lending ear for those good comments. And when customers or clients say a good thing about a particular business, they're highly motivated to share that feeling that they've got. Remember, people don't buy a product or a service, they buy a state. And a state is an anticipated feeling that you're going to get from that product or your service. And so they feel good. And when they feel good and they've said something nice, well, you could ask for their permission if you could digitize that nice thing that they said. Or maybe they could digitize it for you, right? Or in other words, go and say what they just said online. So the system for local businesses to have in place is to train their staff, train their team to have the lending ear. When something good has happened, you ask them to go and leave a review. Well, the easy way to ask them to leave a review is to hand them a postcard with a little QR code on it that gives them instructions on how to leave a review on their smartphone. They do it then and there, right there, or they can take it home. You can go and visit localmarketingsource.com. We have a QR code generator, a little tool that we've built, and you can generate QR codes for your business. All right, now getting into some of the weekly updates. We're talking about the Google Knowledge Graph and how it's different and what it is, I guess, and in regards to the local graph. Well, a few years ago, Facebook came out with their social graph, and now they've launched a variety of different social search tools and whatnot. Well, at the same time, Google pushed for Google Plus. That was their social network, and they based their entire business around the whole social aspect of their future. It was really a make it or break it aspect, that Google had to have a social component to their business or they would fail. Well, now they have a lot of social data on a lot of different people through a lot of their different products. And Google, being search, with products like Google Now and predictive search, really want to make life easier and easier and better in terms of getting access to information. And that's what this is about, is accessing information. It's not about cataloging the best websites that are out there. It's ease of access to information. So Google's knowledge graph was discussed and launched relatively recent, and it's really trying to get real information in the real world about search results in a live fashion. And so you can see the benefit of that on the local side of it for local businesses. Now, there's some challenges that are coming from this. In theory, it sounds really good, and Google's knowledge graph does work really well with a lot of different artifacts and landmarks and major establishments in large cities. But Google goes to describe that their knowledge graph now catalogs what they call objects and the relationships between these objects with intelligence. Now, there's quite a few big words there. What does that mean in English? Well, you can take things like different landmarks, people like celebrities or towns and cities, sports teams, buildings. You could take these things of people or places, and Google knows about information and goes and collects information about each of these entities on a variety of different sites, like Wikipedia, eHow, and user input, Yelp, Facebook, other socials networks, and compiles and decides what information it should look at, what it should compile, and what it's going to display to you. And then you get a display of that information. Well, that's their knowledge graph. It's going to be tough for them to pull off, but we're running into some benefits for the local side of it. But there's some real major challenges with their knowledge graph that Google's going to have to overcome. And in typical Google fashion, one of the biggest challenges that they are going to have to overcome is the user perception of it. What is the difference between the knowledge graph and the local graph? Well, I just took some time to be able to explain that. The local graph being user input businesses in a directory. Well, another challenge is this is just yet another thing that local businesses have to worry about. Yes, there's the Google world, which isn't too complex, but as Google keeps adding something, it does impact the aspects of other sites such as Yelp and City Search. The challenge of repairing information becomes difficult because Google's knowledge graph is pulling information from third-party sites. Excuse me for 30 seconds. Ooh. Sorry about that. I just had to sneeze. I threw you on mute. I have to come again. I don't know if I'm getting sick. Businesses also have a challenge in reporting aspects because this is not a directory that Google owns. So how does a company report information that's misleading, especially sites like Wikipedia that is user inputted? There's really no end user feedback at this point in time either in terms of getting information that may be wrong. And when some of these things happen, there's really no indication on listings that indicate, hey, this listing might need to be fixed. There may be some problems with the information that you're looking at. Google is just expecting us to trust them and trust the computer. There's no support. There's no back-end support like the local side of it. And the data, as I was mentioning, being one of the challenges, is a pretty big challenge because it does come from a variety of different sources. Sure, some come from local, some come from Wikipedia, but you've got to be careful with it. And the last thing I just wanted to mention was with the results that are also local, the Google Knowledge Graph panel, it shows up in an arbitrary way that only shows up only on certain searches. It's very similar searches for the same entity, but it might result in the Knowledge Graph result to be somewhat impure compared to the local panel result. In other words, you're getting different results on different types of searches for different reasons, based off of perhaps social. And the last thing to discuss today is Matt Cutts had a discussion about duplicate content. Duplicate content is something it's been discussed and argued and debated for years. The short answer is don't worry about duplicate content. If you're creating content for the end user, if you're being a good marketer, in other words, and focusing on the customer and the business, not the internet, and you're creating content that focuses on the customer, you're going to want to distribute that on the internet. And distribution can get a little sticky at sometimes. Sometimes you can end up taking that content and distributing it to multiple sites. And what happens there? The other side of duplicate content is having the same paragraph on two different pages of your website, for example. You have duplicate content. But remember that a search engine doesn't look at websites, it just looks at web pages as a whole. So it's looking for two pages that has duplicate content. And there's going to be some thresholds. Is it a 60% duplicate content, 80%, 30%? None of us really know. But that's not relevant. The fact is you're dealing with two sides of duplicate content. First, I'm going to talk about having duplicate content on your own site, which is a big no-no. Because what's going to happen is you could risk having one or both of your pages delisted and possibly your website penalized. There's no point to having the same information on two pages. The objective of navigation is to send people to the right place, not have them looking all over the place for their information, and hopefully they'll have a hit and miss. Those are simple marketing principles in any event.